wormholes, particle physics, extra dimensions. Are the wonders of so-called reality really what they appear to be? Or do we exist in an elaborate hologram? Is our universe the result of random activity or the result of intelligent design? If a creator was involved, can we discover him through our perception of divine order? This is Into the Multiverse with Josh Peck.
What does our government know about UFOs? Could WikiLeaks have the answer? That's what we're going to be talking about today in this very special episode of Into the Multiverse. So thank you for joining me. In studio with me is the lovely, beautiful Christina Peck, my wonderful wife. How are you doing?
I'm great, honey. How are you?
I'm fantastic. You know, we're talking about some dark stuff, but we can find joy in the Lord, and I'm happy about that. Now, before we get started in this, we're going to be talking about some of the Podesta emails and UFO disclosure and what all that means for us as Christians. Before we get into that, though, if this is somebody's first time watching, where can they find us?
You can find us right here on YouTube at youtube.com/Into the Multiverse. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Also, you can go to skywatchtv.com and you can scroll down and you will find the banner of Into the Multiverse with Josh and I on there, and you can click it and it will bring you right here to our YouTube channel. Also, if you have Roku, check us out on Roku under the Skywatch TV channel.
Fantastic. All right, so for those of you who aren't familiar with WikiLeaks, basically what that is somebody hacked into a bunch of emails and they put it out online for everybody to see. And so, and especially with concerns to this episode, John Podesta. Now, for those who might not be familiar with WikiLeaks and they think, well, maybe this stuff isn't even valid. Actually, when this happened, when John Podesta's email was hacked and put online, through WikiLeaks for the world to see, he actually reported it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So you don't report a hacking if it's fraudulent,
yeah.
If it's not real. If somebody said that they hacked my email and then I saw the emails and none of them were even anything, I'm not gonna go to like the FBI or something and make a big report about it. I would just say, well, it's not real. But he actually did report it. So there's really no question about it. These are real. These are actually his emails. But now, who's John Podesta? People might be wondering. I'm going to look at my notes here. He's the former chairman of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. He was the chief of staff to Bill Clinton and counselor to Barack Obama. He actually really pressed the Obama administration towards full disclosure of UFOs. That's this guy's whole deal. He wants the government to release what they have on UFOs. He wants full disclosure. And on the surface, that doesn't sound like a bad thing, And it's not. But I'm not a big believer in like keeping secrets like that from the public, Now, of course, you and I have a different interpretation of what UFOs and aliens are. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that people have the right to know what's going on in the world around them.
Well, other countries disclose that information to their public.
Yeah,
so,
like 25, I think. 25 other countries have done it now.
So, I mean, if 25 other countries are disclosing that information to their public, I understand that in some parts they don't want mass hysteria and stuff.
Yeah, but I don't think that would happen.
At the same time, we have seen so many movies on UFOs and aliens. It's just another day, pretty much. Next alien movie that comes out, okay. We've seen this a million times.
I do think that official disclosure will happen sometime, and when it does, I don't think it's going to be the mass hysteria that the government is supposedly afraid of. And honestly, I don't even think that's their main concern. No. I think they use that, as an excuse. But
I totally agree with you with that.
Yeah. So John Podesta, he was pushing for full disclosure during the Obama administration. He failed. He actually tweeted out that was his biggest failure when it didn't happen. And then he was working with Hillary Clinton towards the same goal. That's actually why Hillary Clinton made that weird remark, during her campaign, that if she gets elected in, she'll find out the truth of UFOs and tell the rest of us. Yeah. But aside from that, that's a whole other show. Aside from that, Podesta, he was actually in contact with an Apollo 14 astronaut named Edgar Mitchell. He was the 6th man on the moon. Edgar Mitchell was pushing for meetings concerning official disclosure. He wanted to meet with Podesta, and apparently they did. And there was this other woman, Terry Mansfield, was a part of this. A couple other people were a part of these emails. But there were strange things that kept coming up in these emails. The language about it. If I'm going to break to you for the very first time something that you don't already know, I'm not going to act like you already know about it. You know, if I was going to tell you, if I was just going to tell you that aliens existed or something, I wouldn't say it as if you already had that information if it was news to you, you know. Mm-hmm. I would kind of brace you for it. Now, if you already knew that, you know, then I might be a little more casual in my language. And that's what these emails show. And actually, we're going to read some of these emails so people can make up their own minds. But throughout these emails, there were 3 main points that kept coming up. That these aliens are, well, they call them ETIs, extraterrestrial intelligences. Mm-hmm. That they're nonviolent, that they are from a contiguous universe. Yeah, which of course that plays right into the multiverse topics, because that's basically a fancy way of saying like
interdimensional.
Yeah, like a higher dimension or a parallel reality or something like that. So not from our universe, but from another. And they want to give us 0-point energy. Which obviously the main question is, if they want to do that, why didn't they do it already? The weird thing is, usually when people talk about 0-point energy, it's kind of just become the new term for what used to be called vacuum energy. Technically, in quantum physics, the term 0-point energy actually just means the resting rate of any, like an energy field or something. Like the resting rate of the Higgs field is something like 270 something. So that number would be its 0-point energy. But anyway, vacuum energy is what they're really talking about. It's weird that they use that term, but it has kind of become just the new term for vacuum energy. And what that means is there's this idea that out in the vastness of space, just when you have a vacuum, that there's actually energy there. And there is.
Yeah.
The vacuum of space isn't a true vacuum.
No.
There's still stuff. There's things like virtual particles, and there's fields, and there's a lot of things. So the idea is they want to like tap into that energy, which would provide free energy for the world, which again, on the surface, doesn't sound like it would be that bad.
Right.
Of course, we have no idea where this energy comes from or how it behaves, or,
right.
you know, I personally think that that's the energy like straight from God that holds reality together. But anyway, now this, of course, leads us to the question of what disclosure might actually look like if it were to happen. If John Podesta and all these other people, if they get their wish, what would disclosure look like? And we've talked about this in other episodes, but what are your thoughts about that? What do you think about disclosure? Is it something that should happen before we get into these emails? And how should we as the church prepare if this is a likely thing, a likely event?
Well, as I said at the beginning of the show, I think that since other countries disclose the information to their public, why not?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that we've been so indoctrinated already with these movies about aliens. I think it would just be another Monday. Yeah. You know, once we found out.
Yeah, I think so too.
So they're there. I don't think it's going to be like, oh my gosh, we got to start looting and rioting in the streets.
Yeah.
And no, I really don't think it's going to be like that at all.
I don't think so either. I think it's going to be slower and more gradual. I think that I think what likely will happen, I think that a lot of people are waiting for this big day where the president gets up in front of everybody and says aliens are real and UFOs are real and they're from this planet and we know about them. And I don't think it's going to happen like that at all. I think it'll probably be like these other countries where just documents are released to the public, and then UFO researchers got to weed through all of it and put pieces together, and then it gets more in the public mind that these things are, you know, it's more and more real. It's more and more of a reality until someday it's just kind of common knowledge that they're probably there. then
Yeah.
the governments of the world are going to talk, more and more as if they are real. And I think it's going to be a slow. Actually, our good friend Tim Alberino uses the term soft disclosure,
Yeah.
and that's what we're in right now. And that makes a lot of sense. Now, we do want to get into some of these emails because there's some really interesting things on how really our government looks at these things, how they see the universe, what they believe even spiritually.
Yeah.
It's really strange. And of course, there are a lot more things in the Podesta emails that are interesting, but maybe not for this show. Like there's a lot of stuff about his relationship with Hillary Clinton, and even the occult stuff. I mean, it's all over the place, and it's pretty
Spirit
crazy.
cooking and
Yeah.
nonsense.
There's a lot, but specific to this, we're going to talk about some of the emails, and I actually printed a few out, and there's a lot more than what we're going to be looking at here. And if people are interested, they can just go to WikiLeaks.org. They can actually search his name, and then you can just put in ETI or something, and it'll come up. So keep in mind that when they discuss ETI, they're talking about extraterrestrial intelligences. Most of these emails are between Edgar Mitchell, who was the Apollo 14 astronaut, sixth man on the moon, and John Podesta. Some of them are from Terry Mansfield, who's also a part of this whole thing. So this first one here, it comes from January 14th of 2014, and it reads, and this was actually from, let me check real quick. This was from Edgar Mitchell himself. So it says, "Dear John Podesta, congratulations on your recent appointment as counselor to President Barack Obama. Now within the Obama administration, you are in a unique position to address disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence in a manner that promotes science, technology, peace, Earth sustainability, and space. John, I would like to schedule a phone conversation at your earliest convenience to discuss what I feel are intensifying imperatives for extraterrestrial disclosure. For many years, you and I have shared a mutual vision of disclosure. I highly commend your public record urging disclosure, which includes the foreword you wrote for Leslie Kean's book and your call for the Pentagon's release of 25-year-old classified government papers on UFO investigations. When our government releases these classified information, we become the 25th country to make public disclosure. You and I also share a mutual vision for Earth sustainability apparent in the escalating demand for a change in global energy policy. Our phone discussion will also include the zero-point energy research and applications developed by my Quantrek International Science Team. Advanced energy science is linked to consciousness research and public disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence. Global consciousness remains one of my top priorities. I envision our species entering deep space as advanced, cooperative, concise, consciously aware, and nonviolent. We are not alone in the universe. How we relate to other intelligent life matters. Understanding how nonviolent ETI from the contiguous universe travel to Earth by means of zero-point energy is key to our acceleration as spacefaring humans. Thank you for letting me know your availability for your phone call. Rebecca Hardcastle Wright, our Washington, D.C. representative for Quantrek, will be in contact with Aaron Sepp regarding scheduling. Best regards, Edgar. So that's really interesting. It's clear that Edgar already knew John had knowledge of this. You know, there is a lot of information there, but he's not saying, hey, just so you know, these things. It's already common knowledge between
Yes.
them. And again, these are John Podesta worked closely with President Obama and worked on Hillary Clinton's. I mean, these are like high official people. So that alone, that was a good introductory email for a lot of what we're going to be looking at. But again, the contiguous universe thing, nonviolent, and it's in all of these. It's that they're nonviolent ETI. It's like if somebody kept talking to me like that, like if you were talking about a coworker, or if somebody was talking about their wife, and they're like, my non-violent wife, Rebecca, this and that.
Yeah.
I'd be like, you don't have to keep telling me that. I get it.
Yeah.
But it's all over in these emails. Continually, they say that they're non-violent and they're from a contiguous universe. And they want to give us zero-point energy. It's like, one time should be enough.
Right.
Here's another one. This one's dated January 18th of 2015. And this one is also from Edgar Mitchell. As 2015 unfolds, I understand you are leaving the administration in February. It is urgent that we agree on a date and time to meet to discuss disclosure and zero-point energy at your earliest available after your departure. My Catholic colleague, Terry Mansfield, will be there too to bring us up to date on the Vatican's awareness of ETI. Another colleague is working on a new space treaty citing involvement with Russia and China. However, with Russia's extreme interference in Ukraine, I believe we must pursue another route for peace in space and zero-point energy on Earth. I met with President Obama's Honolulu childhood friend, U.S. Ambassador Pamela Hamamoto, on July 4 at the U.S. mission in Geneva when I was able to tell her briefly about zero-point energy. I believe we can enlist her as a confidant and resource in our presentation for President Obama. I appreciate Aaron's assistance in working with Terry to set up our meeting. Best regards, Edgar. Now, a couple of things about this email.
My Catholic colleague.
Yeah, that's one thing.
Did he really have to?
Well, because they're, and I'm not saying that all Catholics are like this, but from these emails, at least the Catholics that are involved in this, they're their own little group.
Right.
If you're a Catholic and you're into this stuff and you're a high-ranking, a person of interest or something, then you're in. And that comes through a lot in a lot of these emails. And they want to make sure, hey, just so you know, this person's a Catholic, so it's cool. We can talk freely. Weird, right?
Right.
And as we said in an earlier episode about the Israel UFO connection, the Catholic Church is involved in this a lot, and Tom Horn's done a lot of really good research in that arena, and I think that this just confirms a lot of what Tom's already put out in books and has talked about publicly. The other thing here is some people might have thought it was strange that they talk about a peace treaty in space, a space peace treaty. What that's actually talking about, it doesn't mean. They're not talking about an actual peace treaty between humans and some alien civilization or anything. They're actually just talking about the countries of the world not putting our own weapons in space. Like, they don't want China to put like a nuke in space and point it at us, they don't want that. That's what they're talking about when they talk about a space treaty. It just means a treaty that says countries aren't going to put weapons in space. Now, their motivation for doing that is strange, and we'll get into that in another email, but basically it seems these ETIs have a problem with us weaponizing space. They don't like it. They actually don't like weapons at all on Earth. And other emails have shown, and I don't know if it's in this collection or not, but there have been other emails that have come to light that actually say these aliens, they don't want any weapons on Earth. They don't want us fighting with one another. They definitely don't want us weaponizing space, but not for their care of humanity.
No.
It's for their care of the Earth.
Yeah, they want it.
They do, and I think that actually Revelation 9 talks about that. It says that these locusts that come out of the abyss, they don't. They're commanded not to hurt the trees or any any living thing on the earth. And that word commanded, or the way that it's presented there, it could mean that it's not like you want to do this but don't do it. It could just be that they don't want to do it. There's something in them where they don't want to mess with the earth for some reason. Now, maybe they have future plans for it. Maybe Satan thinks that if he can get rid of humanity somehow, then they can set up their utopia here on Earth. Who knows? But there seems to be something in them that doesn't want the Earth damaged.
Right.
So that's prevalent. I'll tell you what. I'll let you take the next one.
Okay, so this one comes from 2015, August 18th, and it says, Dear John, because the war in space race is heating up, I felt that you should be aware of several factors as you and I schedule our Skype talk. Remember, our non-violent ETI from the contiguous universe are helping us bring zero-point energy to Earth. They will not tolerate any forms of military violence on Earth or in space. The following information in italics was shared with me by my colleague Carol Rosen, who worked closely for several years with Werner von Braun before his death. Carol and I have worked on the treaty on the prevention of the placement of weapons in outer space, attached for your convenience.
Yeah, and again, that's also from Edgar Mitchell. Now, strange because, again, that one paragraph, remember, our nonviolent ETI from the contiguous universe are helping us bring 0-point energy to Earth. Again, I mean, that is repeated over and over and over again. It's like, I get it. Like, I can't imagine, like, in any other context, for any other thing, and what it shows is, I mean, there's a lot of excitement there. You know, there's a lot of excitement about it, and he's like, just so you know, regardless what others might say, here's the truth. But how annoying would that be if every time I talked to you about something and I kept bringing up the same thing like that over and over?
Yeah.
So, but also here, Carol and I have worked on the treaty on the prevention of placement of weapons in outer space attached for your convenience. And there were also, in that email, there's a lot of attachments and stuff. You can actually go through and look at the attachments. But again, that's for other countries. That's not saying it's a treaty between us and aliens, or, you know, fallen angels, you know. That's between other countries. But they did, he did make a point here. Their motivation is because the ETIs don't want us to. Now, isn't that strange? Isn't that strange how because the aliens don't want us to can actually be a good enough reason for foreign policy and things like that to get introduced. Really strange. Okay, so this next one, this one is actually from Terry Mansfield, who the title that she gives in her email is the ETI, or Extraterrestrial Intelligence, Peace Task Force Director. That's a job title.
That's so weird.
That's strange. So this one comes 4/30/2015. Hugs, John. I write on behalf of Dr. Mitchell to request your Skype talk with him ASAP regarding disclosure and the difference between celestials in our own solar system and their restraint by those from the nonviolent contiguous universe. Edgar recently closed Quantrek due to health reasons. His talk with you, John, is of great importance, giving the alternative of your not being aware of these key distinctions, heralding either intergalactic warfare or peace. It is also imperative that after you talk with Edgar, he then speak directly with President Obama via Skype for historical purposes about the same issue while the president is still in office. John, Edgar has consulted on consciousness matters for American presidents in the past. He addressed the UN General Assembly twice. He is not in need of a personal experience, wishes only to serve. Thank you and Aaron for letting me know dates and times that work for your availability so I can relay that to Edgar. Now, this one's weird. I mean, not like they all haven't been weird, but this one's really weird because, well, for one thing, again, it's like that's the title of the race of beings they're talking about. You know, the nonviolent, contiguous. Okay. But here, there's another group called Celestials.
Yes.
You need to talk with him ASAP regarding disclosure and the difference between Celestials in our own solar system and their restraint by those from the nonviolent contiguous universe. And he's also saying that apparently John Podesta, at least at this time, didn't know the difference, and it was important for him to know the difference. So that's strange. There was another email that went into a little bit more detail about that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it even said things like the Celestials or whatever, the beings from our universe are unevolved and they're warlike and you know they're aggressive, but the ETIs from the contiguous universe, they don't want to deal with them and they want to deal with us and give us 0-point energy and everything, so we can't do anything with them. It's weird, right? But it also says that it's so important for John Podesta to be aware of these key distinctions that him knowing or not knowing this could herald either intergalactic warfare or peace. Now here, it doesn't say, when it says intergalactic warfare or peace, it doesn't say whether they're talking about like the space weapons for other countries or if they're talking about the Celestials and the ETIs. But in the context, it sounds like they're talking about the ETIs, which is strange. Or the Celestials, I guess, which are the war-making ones or whatever.
So strange.
Isn't it? And again, that's from Terry Mansfield. Okay, so here's this other one, and this one actually gets into more a little more detail. This is from Edgar Mitchell, and this one is from March 5th of 2015. Dear John, now that you are no longer serving in the White House, I write to you and Aaron requesting our face-to-face meeting to discuss zero-point energy and disclosure. Our Quantrek Science Intuitive has provided us with a few facts about our nonviolent contiguous universe, ETI, who promote pacifism, in all caps, among humans and with whom we work. 1. All true ETI do not inhabit this universe. 2. So-called ETIs inhabit this universe and are in fact just celestials. They are higher in rank than discarnate spirits, even those who are evolved. However, and this is all in caps, however, they just mirror violence on Earth, feeling threatened by contamination of their abode. 3. Extra universal, there's a little misspelling there, but I'm assuming that's what he's saying. Extra universal ETIs, or ETIs from the other universe, on the other hand, have long ago evolved past violence, relying on spiritual intelligence to avert destruction. See, so they're spiritual. He's even saying that this is like a spiritual thing. And what have we been saying on this show forever? Is that spiritual existence and extra dimensional existence are one and the same. It's the same thing. 4. The Phoenix Lights and other sightings have provided ample evidence that Earth has been visited by beings whose intention is purely peace and who have non-violently hovered over Phoenix and other sites, waiting to be asked to help when they could most easily have destroyed the city with their uses of consciousness. These sightings have been witnessed by thousands of people in Phoenix alone, including my colleague, Terry Mansfield, who will accompany me on our meeting with you. Please let me know 3 dates and times that would work best for your schedule. Best regards, Edgar. Now that one is really telling. That's weird, right? Mm-hmm. So apparently, according to them, there's a group or a race of what they call ETIs, which are spiritual beings, and they use the word spirit a little loosely, but it's basically the same thing that we talk about.
Yes.
They're fallen angels.
Yes.
These are fallen angels indeed. But then they say that there are actual physical ones too that exist somewhere in our universe, but those, we just don't deal with those. Those are like the bad guys.
That's so weird.
And those physical ones, I mean, we might even think of them as like gray aliens. Like one possibility is that the bodies of gray aliens are actually cloned from genetic material of us and something else, and it's basically a body for demons to inhabit. So, well, we can just briefly run through them. Here's another one. Dear John, you will note the extreme timing of our request to meet you in the most recent announcement that the U.S. Air Force just released secret files of UFO reports cited in the Blue Book Project, and there's a link there from USA Today. And then he says, I grew up in Roswell. My family knew Oppenheimer. Your family, Christina, is actually related to Oppenheimer.
Yes.
Which is strange.
My mother's maiden name was Oppenheimer.
Yeah, a direct relation. Let's get our
cousin
meeting
of some sort.
Yeah, let's get our meeting time and date set up ASAP so we can move forward on our unprecedented discussion concerning disclosure of ETI. Again, our ETI from a contiguous universe and their connection to zero-point energy for humanity. I mean, it is over and over again. Here's another one. This is from Terry Mansfield. Hugs, John and Aaron. Edgar Mitchell urges you to use the following information for Hillary's use for the campaign, plus with our President Obama request. Edgar wants you to know that on the issue of our nonviolent ETI, he was on the phone just as they were happening over Phoenix, with an eyewitness describing on March 13th, 1997, this incentives about disclosure, while other reports like Roswell, disincentives. Our requested Skype talk with John will elaborate on this. There's one more that's a little long. I'm going to read through it fast because it's the last one and it is kind of long, but I want to make sure to get this in. So this is to this Aaron person, and it is from Terry on behalf of Edgar Mitchell. So I'm just going to run through this real fast. Dr. Edgar Mitchell asks that I write to Mr. Podesta and you requesting his meeting in Washington, D.C. with John to discuss disclosure and zero-point energy. As John is aware, more than 20 countries, including the Vatican, have released top-secret papers discussing extraterrestrial incidents on Earth over many years. The U.S. has not participated in disclosure yet. Attending the meeting with Dr. Mitchell will be the following. Dr. Han Hill, Catholic philanthropist. Dr. Michael Mansfield, Catholic retired Air Force colonel. Mrs. Terry Mansfield, Catholic consultant, replacing Dr. Rebecca Wright for Dr. Mitchell in this matter. Because of his own background as a Catholic, we feel it is imperative that John be aware of the Vatican's interest in ETI, extraterrestrial intelligence, and in sustainability for our planet. The Vatican has hosted global seminars on the repercussions of humans interacting with ETI and how this will affect religion and consciousness. The Vatican's observatory is located here in Arizona, and its top astronomer, this is talking about Mount Graham, which Tom's done extensive research into, and its top astronomers, including Father Jose Funes and Brother Guy Consolmagno, who have met with Pope Francis, have publicly stated that God's creation could very well include other intelligent life that would mean they are our brothers. We work with specific ETI from a contiguous universe. They are nonviolent and in complete obedience to God. Are you kidding me?
Wow.
Are you kidding me? Our ETI's connection to zero-point energy is obvious in that their purpose is to guide Edgar's International Quantrix Science Team to apply their zero-point energy research for humanity. And this goes on and on. That's probably the most important part of it. But they make note that they're in obedience to God. But which God are they in obedience to?
Right.
So we want to know what you have to what you think about all this. Leave a comment below. Now talking about events that possibly are prophetic. We don't know for sure because we're on this end of future prophecy. We'll know if and when something happens, but that's like one of the difficulties in talking about prophecies that have yet to be fulfilled. It can be kind of difficult to know how to predict things, or even if we should bother to try. You know, we're told things like, you can't know the day or the hour. Jesus didn't even know the day or the hour of certain events like that. So some things are left ambiguous, but I do think that there are other things that are at least worth discussing. Right.
You've looked a lot into this and recently did a video on it on your other YouTube channel. And a lot of UFO or alien encounters correlating with Israel.
Yeah, it's weird. And it's almost chilling how this keeps coming up, because just yesterday I did a video at the time of this recording, but just yesterday I did a video for my personal YouTube channel, and already new things have come out, and new discoveries and everything. And there's a lot of correlation. We're going to be getting into a few in this episode. We don't have time to do all of them because there's a lot. I mean, I just even found some more this morning. So there are a lot. But before really getting too heavy into this, I want to make sure our audience knows that we're not trying to make predictions here.
No.
We see a lot of this on social media, a lot of Facebook posts about, there's going to be an asteroid, or NASA predicts 3 days of darkness. How many times have we seen that reposted time and time again?
Yeah, it's years ago, and it's still going around. When Mars was actually closer, and where you could actually see it not visible really, like to the naked eye, all the detail, but I took out my telescope when it was closer in the orbit, and you were able to see the canyons clearer, and it was pretty awesome. But of course, it's still circulating. At this time, Mars is going to be here. And this is back in like 2000.
Oh yeah, like the gravity's going to affect Earth somehow, or
and this is like back in like 2004, and I'm like, yeah, it's 12, 13 years too late, people. Yeah. You missed it.
And that does happen. There are times where Mars is closer to Earth, but it's not so much to where it's going to affect, anything in a really destructive way. But we do see a lot of, predictions made on social media, and I just want to make sure our audience knows this is not one of those. We're not making predictions. What we're doing here is connecting dots that are either pointing to something within the next couple of years, or it's just all coincidence. And even if it is just all coincidence, it's a pretty fantastic coincidence.
It's pretty cool.
And so that alone would be worth discussing. Now, I actually first heard about this correlation between major well, actually, it wasn't UFOs when I first heard about it. I was reading a book, and you can actually get this book at skywatchtvstore.com, but an excellent book called What Dwells Beyond by Jeffrey Martis. A fantastic researcher. This honestly is one of the best books on the subject I've ever read, and I've read a ton of them. But he makes a correlation between events in Israel's ancient past and the idea of, or the resurgence of the idea of cosmic pluralism. And basically, for those at home who might not be familiar with this, cosmic pluralism is the idea that there are multiple inhabited worlds out in the universe besides Earth. Usually hundreds or thousands or even millions. So the book was What Dwells Beyond, and Jeffrey Martis actually made note of how in 600 BC, Nebuchadnezzar burned Jerusalem to the ground, but that was also when cosmic pluralism actually began. And the next important date was in 70 AD when Rome burned Jerusalem to the ground. And at that time, a philosopher named Plutarch wrote in his On the Face of the Moon, he actually wrote, here's a direct quote, "The men on the moon, if they do exist, are slight of body and capable of being nourished." Now, what makes that so important is that was actually the last major philosopher to talk about cosmic pluralism until it was revived again in the Middle Ages.
Oh, wow.
So really weird. But then he makes a third observation that kind of ties us all together into our time now. He actually wrote about cosmic pluralism and Roswell. So in 1947, we have the famous UFO Roswell crash, and most people probably already know a lot about that. But 1948 was also when Israel became a nation. Now, those are a year apart, and there might be reason for that, which we can get into a little bit later, but it's around the same time. So obviously, 1947, the Roswell crash really reignited cosmic pluralism, the idea of basically aliens from other planets into modern times. Yeah.
And then going back a little further, in 1917, it's 100 years ago from this year.
From this year, yeah.
2017, the Balfour Declaration was written, paving the way for Israel. And also, Fatima happened back in 1917.
Yeah.
The Miracle of the Sun and World War I, Red Baron shooting down the UFO over Belgium.
So basically, after I read that from Jeffrey Martis, he had those three things that he pointed out. I wanted to look and see if there were others, if there were other major correlations. And oh my gosh, there are a lot. It seems like anytime there's anything significant in Israel, there's also something significant, at least within the year, sometimes right in the same month. Something significant in ufology and the UFO phenomenon. So 100 years ago, so we're in an interesting time right now because the years 2017 and 2018 have a lot of anniversaries from the past. And we have a few of them. But so as Christina pointed out, 100 years ago in 1917 was the Balfour Declaration. And that paved the way for Israel to become a nation later in 1948. But at that same time was the famous Fatima apparition, which at the time it was being publicized as an apparition of the Mother Mary, Mother of God, because of course Catholicism is all over a lot of this stuff. Actually, that's another common thread that keeps coming up is the Catholic Church in a lot of this. But anyway. When you actually read the reports, though, and L.A. Marzulli has done extensive research into this years ago, as have other researchers. I wrote about it in my first book, Disclosure. Yep. But when you actually look at the reports, there was nothing. It wasn't a Marian apparition. It was a UFO. Yeah. They said basically the sun or a shining disc was swooping down, and there were lights. It was a classic UFO thing. Yes. But what makes it so significant are thousands of people saw this. Thousands of people witnessed it. It was a very, very big deal. So that was in that same year. And then also, this was also during World War I, and there were a lot of UFO reports on all battlefronts in World War I. But famously, the Red Baron from Germany, he actually reported shooting down a UFO over Belgium, over like a Belgium forest or something. And books have been written about that, so people can check that out. So that happened 100 years ago. So it's strange that during this major event in Israel's history, the Balfour Declaration, which was absolutely vital for Israel to become a nation again, that all this UFO activity happens. Now you were talking about 120 years ago.
Yeah, and in 1897, 120 years ago, the first Zionist Congress was held in Switzerland, and
and that was actually I don't mean to cut you off, but that was actually the very first step at Israel becoming a nation again. Happened in 1897. That's what that first Zionist thing was all about. And there's a lot of history on there, and people can look that up on their own. But anyway, so continue.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so the first Zionist Congress was held in Switzerland, as I said, and the Basel Declaration.
And that again was the very first step at Israel becoming a nation again. But there was also
the Aurora UFO incident.
Yeah. So basically the story behind that, and you and I, we've seen documentaries on this. This actually was like the first Roswell. This was as big as Roswell was before its time. So in Aurora, Texas, basically what happened, it was reported that there was a UFO crash. It crashed into I think it was a silo or a windmill, or it crashed into something on somebody's farm. And all the pieces of this thing were collected and thrown in a well.
Yeah.
And actually, there have been tests on that well made recently, and it's radioactive. It's really strange. People can look that up on YouTube. And but there have been actual documentaries made about this thing. But the weird thing is that it was reported that the pilot of the craft died. It was a very small, it was an alien. Died, and they buried it in a grave at the local cemetery. Well, so that story got out, and then years and years later, ufologists got interested in it, and they wanted to find that grave. Well, around that time, someone moved it, and now it's in an unmarked grave somewhere in the same cemetery. So the story goes.
Yeah, that's really creepy.
Yeah, so somewhere in that cemetery, but nobody knows where. It's strange that major event in UFO history happened at the same time as this, as the first Zionist Congress. Now, also, we could look at 40 years ago. 40 years ago was the Camp David peace accords with Israel and Egypt. That's when they were signed, and that was between 97 and 77 and 78, and that is rich with history of how that shaped what Israel and the surrounding nations are today. There's a lot there, but at that same time was also Operation Saucer, which was a major investigation into this time in Brazil's history, where they were basically being invaded by UFOs and even alien beings. And actually the newspaper called O Liberal, their local newspaper, called it an invasion. And so they launched Operation Saucer, which was an investigation into what they called it the Colares UFO flap, because that was the city that this happened in, the Brazilian city. So yeah, Colares underwent extreme UFO and alien activity, and there's more information online about that. So that was 40 years ago. Now, what happened 50 years ago?
50 years ago, 1967, it was the Six-Day War in which Israel defended against invading armies. At the same time this was going on, it was the most intensive and long-lasting UFO flap of all time. Recorded.
Yeah, and that's according to NICAP. And actually, right on NICAP's website, I'll give you the link here. They put together a massive 85-page chronology of UFO incidents and events for 1967. And again, they call it the mother of all sighting waves. It's the biggest UFO flap ever. And you can go to nicap.org/waves/1967 full rep. But the weird thing is, so we have 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 70 years ago, 120 years ago. And again, there are more of these, like the Camp David Peace Accord thing, and this is something that I just found out this morning. were that the normalization of relations between Israel and Egypt actually occurred in 1980. And 1980 was the Rendlesham Forest incident, which was, if people aren't familiar with that, look it up. It's an amazing story. But in Britain, it's actually called Britain's Roswell. But in Britain, there was a UFO spotted by their military, and a couple of military officials went to check it out. One of them even touched it and started seeing binary in his head.
Yes, I remember that story.
I mean, there have been some amazing documentaries made about that too. So it's strange that all those numbers, it all points to 2017, 2018. Now, again, this is not a prediction. We're looking at dots and seeing if anything connects. We're not going to know. It could very well be that 2018 passes and nothing happens.
Right.
But why do we think that there might be something here? Is there anything in the Bible with these numbers that actually talk about? There's actually quite a bit. And again, keep in mind, it's not a prophecy. It's not a prediction by us. We're not doing anything like that. We're just having a conversation. If 2018 comes and goes, I don't want people to point at us and say that we were wrong, because we're not predicting anything anyway.
No, we're not. We're
commenting on some strange coincidences. Let's just call them that for now. Now, where does all this lead? Well, to start that, or I should say, not where does all this lead, but where do we get any kind of precedence for this in Scripture? So I want to start with Matthew 24, verses 32 through 34, which states, "Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise, ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled." Now, there's a common interpretation of the fig tree that it represents Israel. A lot of people believe that. But what a lot of people can't agree on is how long a generation is.
Right.
And there's a lot of different answers for it, but one of the weirdest things about this is actually the numbers that we looked at before could all apply, which is really strange. And we'll go through and show you how. So the first one that we have is 120 years. That was the earliest that we looked at. So Genesis 6:3, God said, "My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. Now, a lot of people, or I shouldn't say a lot, some believe that God was saying that man would only live to be 100, like the lifespan of a human being would be 120 years now. And I don't think that's right. I think what God was saying was it's going to be 120 years until the flood, because he's saying that his spirit won't always strive with man, but it will strive with man for another 120 years, and then the flood. I think that's what that's saying. So that gives us an example for 120 years. Now, what about 100 years?
So 100 years. In Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 through 16, God tells Abram that his descendants will be afflicted for 400 years in the land that is not their own, which
turned out
Egypt.
Egypt, yeah.
It then says, in the fourth generation, that they shall return to their own land. In this instance, to know how long a generation is, we have to divide 400 years by 4 generations, and then you get 100 years.
100 years, exactly. So that right there, that's one instance where it defines a generation as 100 years. And this is all in different contexts, because there are different places throughout the Bible where a generation can mean different things or different spans of time. So in this context, a generation is 100 years. Now, a generation can also be 70 years. Psalm 90, verse 10 says, "The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years. Yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away." So that's one point where a generation can be 70 years. And a lot of people have, well, some Christians, some researchers have taken that to a place that I personally am not willing to go. There have been some that have used the 70 years thing, and then they apply it to the 1947 or 1948, excuse me, of Israel becoming a nation again, and saying, well, 70 years past that would be 2018. That's when the Lord's going to return. I don't go that far with it.
Right.
I don't think we could know that, and I would never want to make a prediction like that and then lead somebody to believe it, and then it doesn't happen.
Right.
Now, could it? I mean, he could come back before we even finish this program. So, sure, it could. But we're not predicting that. We're not teaching that. We're not teaching it's going to be the rapture or the breaking of a seal or the return of Jesus. We're not saying any of that stuff.
No.
Some have. We're not.
Not getting into any of that.
Just in the spirit of just because we should always be prepared for his return, should we prepare? Absolutely.
Always.
Because we always need to be prepared. But we're not pointing to 2018 and saying that's the rapture, that's when Jesus is going to return. How could we know? We don't know that. So we here at Into the Multiverse and Skywatch TV, we err on the side of caution there. So that gives us 70 years. Now what about 50 years?
Leviticus chapter 25 verses 8 through 17 tells us about the 7 cycles of 7 years.
Right.
Which is 7 times 7 is 49, and the 5th year is the Jubilee.
Right.
The 50th year is the Jubilee. In ancient Israel, the Jubilee year was basically a big reset button. The land was not to be sown nor reaped. Slaves and prisoners were freed. Debts were forgiven. And we can look at that today, like even people with credit. Every 7 years, it drops off your credit.
And what's interesting too is that somebody actually pointed out to me online that from 1917, which was the Balfour Declaration, you give one Jubilee cycle to that, and you're led to 1967. Because it's 50 years later. Well, you give another Jubilee cycle to that, and you're at 2017. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool, but it's strange too. So 40 years, that's the next one. Now, there's a lot of significant things that we could point to concerning a period of 40 years. But more specifically, Psalm 95:10 states, 40 years long was I grieved with this generation, and said, it is a people that do err in their heart, and they have not known my ways. So that points back to the 40-year wandering in the desert of Moses and the children of Israel. And actually another verse we could look at, Numbers 32:13 states, and the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was consumed. So very strange. So we could give a brief recap to where this takes us now. So we have 120 years ago, in 1897, was the Aurora UFO incident, and it was also the first Zionist Congress, which it was the very first step in Israel becoming a nation again. 100 years ago, we have 1917. We have the Fatima UFO, also the Red Baron thing, and the Balfour Declaration. So 100 years ago this year. Now, 70 years ago, we have between 1947 and 1948, we have the very famous Roswell UFO crash, but we also have the very famous Israel actually becoming a nation again. So it's strange how the intensity, even seems to follow the same pattern. 50 years ago, in 1967, we have the NICAP even admits the biggest UFO wave of all time anywhere. And we also have Israel defending Jerusalem in the Six-Day War. And there is a ton of miracles about the Six-Day War. There's I forget the name of it, but there was a really good documentary that was made about all the miracles that surrounded Israel in the Six-Day War. It was phenomenal. So that's 50 years ago. Now, 40 years ago, 1977 to 1978, we have the Colares UFO flap in Brazil, but we also have the Camp David Peace Accords. And if we follow that to its resolution, again in 1980 was when the normalization of relations between Israel and Egypt took effect. And 1980 was also Rendlesham Forest. Very strange. So all of this seems to point to the years between 2017 and 2018, we have all these anniversaries. The 40th anniversary of the Caleres UFO flap and the Camp David Peace Accords, the 50th anniversary of the Jubilee from the UFO wave and the Six-Day War, 70-year anniversary of the Roswell UFO crash and Israel becoming a nation, the 100-year anniversary of Fatima, the Red Baron thing, and the Balfour Declaration, and the 120-year anniversary of the 1897 Aurora UFO incident and the First Zionist Congress. So it's very strange that all of these point to somewhere within this year and next year. Now, again, we're not saying that anything's going to happen. God doesn't have to do anything. Our understanding is extremely limited because we're human. So it could be that those years pass and nothing happens.
Nothing.
You know, and in fact, the safe money would be on that.
Yeah, that's usually what I do. I'm like,
I mean, how many times have predictions been made and then just nothing happens, and then the person who makes the prediction, you know, looks like a fool.
Right.
So we're not trying to do that. We're not making predictions, but
it would be interesting if something happened.
Exactly, and that's why we're talking about it, just speculating what could happen. And people have asked my opinion on this. I actually had one very, very dedicated viewer of my other YouTube channel, a very sweet woman, but she was actually commenting, like begging for my opinion. What does this mean? What do you think this means? And I tried to dodge it, and I didn't want to give my opinion because actually my opinion is just I don't know. But she wore me down, and I said, okay. If likely nothing will happen, you know.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be prepared. If something is going to happen, my bet would be it's going to be something major in Israel's history. It's going to be something major. Now, I don't know if that's a war or, you know, that could be any number of things, but also something major in the UFO community. Maybe another big sighting or maybe official disclosure, you know, that could be something. So there are a lot of possibilities, a lot of things that could happen. We're not predicting anything. We're just kind of giving our evidence to the audience and letting the audience decide what they want to think about it. Because again, here at Into the Multiverse, we don't tell you what to think. You know, we'll give you our opinion and show you our evidence, but it's up to you what you want to think. But what about you? What do you think about all this?
If anything were to happen, like you were saying, it would be something probably with Israel, some major step in Israel, or the UFO community. Like there might be another sighting, like you said. That's what I take from it. You know, I'm not gonna say that anything spectacular is going to happen. Right. It just may or may not happen. Yeah.
So I think it's a good idea, and we should be prepared anyway. It's a good idea to prepare and really we should do this anyway. How would we respond if there was another major sighting? How do we as Christians respond to the whole UFO phenomena? If there was a major worldwide sighting, let's say, how should we as Christians now? Because a lot of Christians are just going to sweep it under the rug.
Well, yeah, and I understand that. I'm old enough to remember the Phoenix Lights.
Sure, yeah.
I remember seeing that on TV.
Yep.
I was like, oh, and that's when I asked my dad. I was like, so UFOs, they're real?
You know what? 1997, 20 years ago from 2017.
Oh.
That's when the Phoenix Lights happened.
It was 1997. Was it? Yeah, it was 1997.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
Wow, that is crazy. I thought, wow. That is very interesting, you know, because I remember turning to my dad. How old was I then? I was 11 in 1997. 10 going on 11. Yeah, so I remember turning to my dad. So UFOs, they're real? They're a thing? You know, and my dad's like, yeah. My dad was in the Army. You know, he never believed in them. And then he was working on the radar, and he said there was something that was there, and then the next second, it was gone.
Yeah, you told me about that. He actually saw one on radar.
Yep. And he had no explanation for it. And then that's when he realized, oh, well, it could be a thing. And so, like, I remember seeing it on TV, and I turned to my dad. I'm like, oh, this is actually happening, you know, right now. Yep.
Wow.
So I asked him, and I got lots of information, and Yeah. So I think how I took it as a young girl, this is actually a year before I saw my very first sighting, up close and personal. I didn't really know how to take it.
Yeah.
It just, okay, my dad told me his stories. I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting. Okay, so they're real. And when I had my experience, of course, I went through a phase where I was like deathly afraid of these things. I feared them more than anything else in the entire world.
Yeah.
And then I realized what they were, and I'm like, okay, I'm not afraid of them anymore.
Yeah.
They're just another thing we have to deal with.
Yeah, it's another demonic type
Yeah.
of entity that, yeah.
And so I don't fear it. I'm not going to be one of those extremists who goes crazy and start telling you that the end is near and all, what we see, even on social media and in different groups about these things.
Yeah, and
I think what we should do as Christians is just be prepared for anything, any kind of sighting, any kind of news, and just keep going in the Word.
Yeah, right. And it's a good idea, too, to be familiar with Genesis 6 and how, the fallen angels really connect with the whole UFO phenomenon, how it's really like the same thing. It's a good idea to be well-versed in that, because if there is a major sighting, or if there's something major, or if disclosure happens, or something like that, we Christians we're going to have to provide an answer for most of the church, because most of the church isn't going to want to touch it. I mean, that's what we see now. When the Phoenix Lights happened, most of the church isn't going to talk about that. I never heard about it in church. I'm sure most people haven't. But so if something happens, we need to be able to provide an answer. And I do believe Genesis 6 and the whole Nephilim thing is the answer to that. So we should do that. We should always be prepared for that anyway. I mean, we never even know when we're going to come across somebody who has had a UFO experience and might not be a Christian. And we could actually do them a great service by believing them. Because anybody, I mean, you've seen a UFO, and anybody who has had an experience like that has dealt with scrutiny and people trying to tell them that they don't believe it. People have had to deal with that.
Yeah, you're crazy. You're schizophrenic. Oh,
exactly.
Okay.
How much impact could we have on that person if we actually said, you know what, I absolutely believe you, and I think I might have an answer for you. If you validate what they already know to be true, that this experience happened, and you believe them, they'll listen to every word you have to say. I mean, that's actually what got me into New Age years and years and years ago, because I was being told that, my experiences with demons and things like that, I was being told by other Christians that it wasn't real, or it was just dreams. And then here I had a New Age friend who was believing everything that I said and actually provided answers, I thought.
Yeah.
And so that took me down a wrong path. We can use that same tactic to take people on the right path. We can use that same tactic. We just believe what they say, assume innocence, and try to give them some answers. So we should be prepared in those regards, not necessarily for 2017 or 2018, just every day we should be prepared.
Yeah.
But also we never know when we're going to meet the Lord.
It's true.
We could die at any time.
Yeah.
For people who believe in a pre-trib rapture or, whatever. I don't want to get into a rapture thing, but that could happen. But, I mean, even if not rapture, we never know when we're going to leave this world. So we should always be prepared to meet Jesus. So every day we should be prepared. So I guess that's the ending message for this. So keep in mind, again, this isn't a prediction. This isn't a show of prophecies or anything like that. We don't know what's going to happen. Probably nothing. But in case something does, we want to be prepared. So I want to thank you all for watching. Stay tuned next week. If you enjoyed this episode, you'll like that one too. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for joining us into the multiverse. As always, take care and God bless.